just go through the slides here and reference them accordingly.
Great. Perfect. All right.
Okay, we're approving the minutes of the meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have this vote language up here. We're looking for approval for meeting minutes from December 14th, 2023, SBC meeting.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the December 14th meeting.
Motion, Abington.
Abington, second by Sedgwick. I'll call the roll. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes.
George Cooney.
Yes.
Jim Kaufman.
Yes.
Jack Manning.
Yes.
Bob Mello.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob. Frank Muller.
Yes.
Thanks, Frank. Tom Petroselli.
Yes.
Dustin Ridden.
Yes.
And Dan Salvucci.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now it's invoice time.
Tonight we have two invoices up for approval. Invoice number 9 for left field, in the amount of $29,000, and invoice number 5 for DRA, in the amount of $27,500, for a total of $56,500 for approval tonight.
Motion. Sedgwick made the motion to,
Second.
second by Dan. I had my head down, I didn't see it. I'll call the roll. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes.
George Cooney.
Yes.
Jim Coughlin.
Yes.
Jack Manning.
Yes.
Bob Mello.
Yes.
Frank Muller.
Yes.
Tom Petroselli.
Yes.
Dustin Ridden.
Yes.
Dan Salvucci.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Let's do that, yeah. I don't know why the top part hasn't, the top part hasn't fully loaded, but it's fully loaded. Basically, I just want to say we're in very good shape for where we are in the process right now. We're committed, 74% of the budget is committed, and we've expended 35%. That's a very good place for us to be right now. There are, technically 512,000 uncommitted funds, but we do have some anticipated extra services and reimbursables that are expected now through the end of schematic design. And those are in the range of 200,000. So we have a remaining fund of $312,000 to get us through feasibility study. As we discussed at our last meeting, we'll be procuring a CM at risk for the project. And some of that fund will be used to bring those folks on. As an update for the process for that, we're currently working with Tom to put together our application for the IG's office for submitting that. They need to approve the process. While they're reviewing and approving the package, we've never had any issues getting approval within 2 to 4 weeks usually. While they're doing that, we can move forward with the request for qualifications to get that process rolling. We anticipate selecting a CM at risk by early April and likely working through a contract and bringing that back to this group for approval in later April so that they're on board in time to participate in the schematic design phase. They'll participate in the budget, developing the budget, figuring out logistics for the project, which also weighs into the budget. They will do constructability reviews and work hand in hand with the project team to really nail down the project. And by the end of that, it'll result in a more accurate budget going into SD. And that they'll be able to participate if at that point this group would like to see some costs come down a little bit. They'll be able to work with us as a team to help shape that. So we're excited to bring someone on, and we'll keep you guys informed of that process as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could just.
Yes. Go ahead.
Jen, could you just speak to the process of selecting
Mhm.
CMR? So the Inspector General's office requires, the initial interview committee would be made up of you and Carl. And then talking to Bob Haywood, it would include Bob Mello, Bob Mahoney, and myself. Yeah, and so we've got to submit some documentation. The process for interviewing candidates, is that treated in a public fashion like any other? Or in other words, are we publicly posting for meetings where we're going to interview companies 1, 2, and 3, or is that not subject to?
That can be, I have seen it done, I've seen it done both ways. We'll make sure that we're doing it the right way for this project. Say, I've seen other communities, post it differently or, so we'll look into make sure that that's done.
So in other words, if there were members of the committee who aren't necessarily being, the interviewers, who wanted to observe these interviews happening, and we knew that we had a quorum of this committee that wanted to, we would just post where we would post for a meeting so that the committee could gather.
Yes.
So that the process could be done properly.
Right.
Okay, yeah, and then that would culminate with coming back to the full school building committee for a vote on the CMR.
Right.
Thank you.
And it is a two-step process, just so folks know. We won't jump right into interviews. We're going to request qualifications packages first. We'll get a bunch of those in, then the selection committee, along with Carl and myself, will be reviewing, checking references and things like that, and coming back to the committee with that information to determine who is qualified based on what was written in the RFQ. And then we invite those qualified firms to submit proposals. And then the technical proposals and fee proposals, but we keep the fee proposals sealed until after the interviews and after the selection committee ranks the firms based on their technical proposals and their interviews. And then we can see fee and rank again, and then make a selection. So that is the process. That's what's happening between now and April. And we'll bring you guys along every step of the way.
Thank you. Okay. Any
And
other questions? Okay, sorry.
it was great.
No, we're good.
Oh, good, okay.
No,
One other point to make before we move into the cost update. I think just talking about the CM and the timing of the next steps. In talking to the project team and Tom and everyone involved on our end, we have, originally we were planning on submitting the preferred schematic report at the end of January, meaning we would be expecting this committee to make a decision on a preferred solution at our next meeting on the 25th. But this is a lot of information to digest. We still have 6 options on the table, and 2 enrollments, and there's a lot to really look at, and we were thinking it might be better to push the PSR submission to the end of February, which will still keep us in line for the April MSBA Board of Directors meeting to approve the PSR report.
Yeah.
So we're thinking of, taking a little more time to come to the actual decision on which option makes the most sense for your school. And that in turn would then push out the schematic design submission a little bit, which is still fine, in terms of MSBA process and the team's process. So we would be looking, instead of submitting at the end of June, we'd be looking to submit at the end of August in time for the October 2024 MSBA Board of Directors meeting to approve the SD submission, and at that point they'll also be approving budget and their participation in the project before it goes out to a vote. So we think that taking up a little more time on this front end for things like more community outreach and getting more voices heard throughout, especially the schematic design process, and then also bring the CM at risk on to participate in that process for a longer time than just giving us a budget and pricing. We think that would be beneficial, especially just given it's a big project, there's lots to consider. The costs aren't an easy thing to swallow, so diving into that a little more in the next phase as well. So that's what we were thinking for extending the between now and schematic design essentially, but it keeps us on track to have a vote at the same time. So
Yeah.
And that's I think the important part for the overall price of the project, because then we're keeping timeline.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, we're just bringing everybody up to speed on that, because I think that's an important point.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
just to piggyback on what Jen is saying, so what that allows for is when we have our next meeting, we'll be in a position to be able, and Jen has some updates for tonight, but we will be in a position as a committee to be able to see more refined numbers. We're gonna look at some numbers tonight where the numbers are lower than the first wave, but there's a wide range of numbers. And the goal is to narrow those ranges down between the estimators that are looking at the design. And on top of that, we would also get more reliable estimates in terms of MSBA reimbursement. So with a tighter range of estimators, the range of potential costs, that makes us as a committee more, we're more informed. We're better informed about making a decision on design and enrollment, back out the MSBA reimbursement, and then we can take it a step further and say, if all that were true, now we can start looking at the town by town impact. So that we're not approving a design and an enrollment in a bubble and then figuring out exactly what the town impact costs are later. Because once we submit that, correct me, Jen, once we submit that PSR, that's it, that train leaves the station. So by moving that ultimate decision out 4 or 5 weeks to deeper into February, it gives us more time to explain that and to shop that out there to members of our communities to be able to hear that before this SBC makes that PSR decision. A worthwhile 4 or 5 extra weeks to do that.
Tom, I have a question. On MSBA, what the reimbursement rate is. When our school committee, we had a big push to state that vocational school new building projects are more costly than your normal school. If the state finally says, oh my God, they're right, we've already bidded everything out, we've already borrowed. Do you think, would the state ever say, okay, we're gonna offer you 45%, we're gonna give you 50% now? Would they ever upgrade that?
I can only say, Dan, that and both Carl and Jen can punctuate this a bit, but there was a recent act of the legislature that helped several schools, vocational schools, with inflation reduction. So they were further in the pipeline, they got whacked because they had approved budgets and then costs went sky high. There was some relief there. There may have also been, with the recent adjustment in MSBA reimbursement rates, there was in fact, there were some districts that were a little further along in the pipeline that got some relief. So while that doesn't guarantee, Dan,
It's a possibility.
I think it's a possibility that if somehow there was a regulatory change or a decision to adjust reimbursement rates, they would set parameters as to who in the pipeline would benefit. So they had a range before, fingers crossed for the future.
Especially with this growing, you see a school system growing, like ours is, and why we're doing it.
Right.
I had a quick one.
Go ahead, George.
Does the state reimbursement, is it more likely to get what you're after if you get in there early? Do they run out of money as the year, or in other words, we have competition for a bucket of money that the state has. It could run out because we've been talking about expenses going up, and if there's 4 or 5 other vocational or even high schools that are trying to get money from the state to do this, when you get to be like last in line, you know, it's a nail biter, right? Or is it not?
And again, Jen, you can certainly speak to this better than I can, so, you know, Mr. Chair.
No, definitely.
Yeah, so that, the reimbursement rate really is based on various rates of different, the towns that are involved. We are actually actively working to figure out exactly how the MSBA divides that rate up, if it's, you know, weighted equally, or if it's weighted by enrollment. The MSBA hasn't given us a straight answer on that just yet. But that's what it's based on. It's not necessarily based on, oh, you're coming in at December and you're the last of the guys to ask for money. It doesn't work like that. It's based on what is in the project, what by their standards and rules they deem eligible versus ineligible. So that's not a worry. You're in the pipeline, so that's good news.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, well, in our experience, I believe that once you're invited into the pipeline, you know, whenever that was, over a year ago, there's a little black book that the MSBA keeps that they earmark so much money for. And so it's still there. It doesn't go away, even though they take on new projects every year and so
Yeah.
forth. So they do have some sort of accounting that
Anticipates.
protects your
Your place in line?
Yeah,
Yeah.
your place in line will not be lost by.
In the queue.
a couple months.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so, folks are ready to move on to the cost update.
Oh,
Then you just get.
looks like we lost some slides.
And some.
For,
So in the.
yeah, for Frank and Bob, that's slide 1, 2, 3, 4, slide 6. PSR cost comparison.
Actually, see, I have not memorized these numbers, so I'm just gonna.
I just counted, that's all. Yeah, 6. Yeah, you got it, somebody told you that you got it. That's what she'll be tackling next. Yeah, that's what she'll be covering next. You got it, yep, absolutely. Yeah, it says PSR cost comparison.
Got it.
Folks are looking at their handouts, I do have them in front of me, and I can speak to the numbers. I have not committed these numbers to memory yet, so. So as an update, folks still have their pages in front of them, page 6. So this is a cost comparison, just to show you, and actually Tom put this together, it's very clean and to the point, thank you.
I chose the blue.
Yeah, very nice.
I like blue.
Matches my slide very well. So this is really just to show where we were in PDP with the numbers, and where we have come in PSR. So we had, just to bring everybody back up to speed, we had 2 estimators, or have 2 estimators working on the cost and the estimates for the project. So we've had received draft estimates, and we have had a first round of reconciliation meetings where, you know, they're on the same call and they go line by line and just making sure they're making the same assumptions. So we have wound up with this range of total project costs based on that initial call. This is a bit larger of a range than we would typically see and what the MSBA would expect at this stage. So we are working with estimators to get them a little bit more information to see if we can get them closer in their estimates to see where the assumptions may be off a little bit here and there. So we are working on getting them what they need, and we will have that update for the next meeting next week. But this is the range that we're seeing right now. So, you know, for you can see for the 805 enrollment for NC 2.0, we went from 344.1 million total project budget, which is including soft costs and the construction budget, down to 266 million to 287 million. So that's kind of how this slide works. We have come down significantly with you know, more detail that DRA has been able to put in. As you'll remember, the last round is basically narratives and some cartoons is what you get at the PDP stage. So now that DRA has really, you know, talking about site and layout of the building, we've been able to narrow down what that cost really is likely to come in at. So this is very good news from my perspective, that we're coming down as we expected to. Again, at PDP phase, because of all of the unknowns, there's a lot of fluff that is put in. We had 1 estimator, so they weren't able to compare against somebody else for some background and back and forth. So this is great news, and I can get into a little more detail on the next slides. But to stop here for a moment, does anyone have any questions on what happened between PDP and PSR? Or you just want to get right into the other comparison spreadsheets?
Mr. Chair, I'll just add to Jen's comments that so the two numbers that make up the range, essentially, one number represents an estimator, and in this case, the lower number represents the estimator that Left Field has independently doing the work. And at and the larger number in the range is the estimate that DRA's subcontractor is working on. And that's the reconciliation that Jen's gonna continue to work with all the parties on. So that when you do the math and you figure out, okay, that's a range of X millions of dollars, the goal is that those ranges would narrow as the estimators double and triple check the information that they have available to provide that estimate. And in addition, once again, these numbers do not include any potential MSBA reimbursement. So step one, the range narrows. And maybe it narrows and it's a little more expensive. It doesn't mean it's narrowing in one direction, but the two estimators have more of a meeting of the minds. And then the next phase that we'll learn more about next week is that these numbers will be lower because there'll be an estimated MSBA reimbursement on top of that. And I'll just make one observation just as a member of the committee that the original estimates with ad reno versus new construction were either at or above. Ad reno was at or above new construction.
Yep.
Now the ad renos are looking slightly less. That doesn't mean I'm passing no judgment on that, but other than noticing that these numbers are all declining at roughly the same percentage, 20-something% reduction. Thank you.
Yeah,
I have another question. You could refresh my memory on the difference between NC 2.0 and 2.1. I mean, it says, a Senate.
Yes.
Senate call. What's that?
So, Mr. Chair, Dan, that is, the 2.0 is the locker room, the gymnasium, and the auditorium are at the far end.
Okay.
And 2.1 was the design where all of that common area was in the middle.
Mhm. Yeah, what you said earlier about us needing more time, I had knocked the ad reno totally out of my mind. It was gone. And now it's like, the towns are, maybe that's a cheaper way to go for the towns. I don't know, so a lot of numbers, but I need more time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when Carl does go through the evaluation matrix, I think, cost alone, I think it's back in the mix. There might be some other reasons that we'll review in a little bit.
Yeah, but just
considering
looking
it
at
all-
dollars here,
Exactly.
it was gone, now it
And now it's
came back.
coming back.
Can I get a comment on that? Just, if we did an ad reno, I think that if you're gonna spend that amount of money on a school, you wanna make sure the school's gonna last
Oh,
another 50, 60 years.
I'm just saying, money-wise, it changed.
Money-wise, right, I understand that.
Didn't say I want it.
I mean, if we did an ad reno and we renovated the existing building, can it be guaranteed that it would last as long as a new section? No, probably not.
That's
It's like putting a new addition on your house, and that's nice, but yeah.
No, I'm agree with you, but I was just saying dollar for dollar at the
Yeah, I
beginning.
understand that, yeah.
It was gone.
It's easier to throw it out.
Yeah, okay, it went.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
when you say so one of the low number is one estimator, the high number is another estimator. Are you saying that the two estimators are now gonna meet to review each other's costs?
Yes, and we've had one round of that, and then they updated their numbers, but because of the timing, we hadn't had time to meet with them again, since getting that updated final estimate.
Okay.
So we're gonna have that for the next meeting next week. And when we do have, a closer range, for all of my, other analysis. I'm going to use the higher of the two numbers just to be conservative with where we are, so that, it's the higher of the
Well,
range.
you won't know what the numbers are until we go out to bid, basically, that's, and the trouble is that, we know how much money we're gonna have, if we go out to bid, and they're saying the cost is gonna be more, then that means that we either have to make the building smaller to meet their costs, because you don't know the price of lumber and steel and whatever's gonna go sky high, the estimators are looking at it, but 2 years down the line, you don't know.
So
Been
that,
there, done that.
yeah. And that's some of the benefit we have with bringing a CM at risk on during the schematic design, and you can't necessarily see, like, we saw during the pandemic, see these spikes that came out of nowhere. But they have teams that are looking forward and looking at market trends and things like that to kind of hedge against some of that. So they'll be weighing in on the cost and the real, the cost of what it takes them to build the building. So while we can think, okay, well, we'll do this, and then they might come in and see the site and say, well, we need to stockpile some dirt over here, but we can't because we need to phase this so the students can use it for parking, so we need to haul it out, and that's extra cost or something like that. So they'll be able to take a closer look and really inform cost based on how they would build it and what materials are
I
needed.
hope that the state looks at the possible increase in cost of materials and says reimbursement needs to go up, because the price of materials is what we want. But we don't have a machine like they do that makes money.
Okay.
So moving on to the next page is if folks, I just wanted to orient you to how the spreadsheet works. Again, these numbers would be updated for next week. So, but just to have a page for each of the options. The first thing we have here is NC 2.0. You'll see the top 805 students versus 900 students. On the left-hand side, you'll see substructure, shell, interiors, services, all of that. And then at the bottom four, not at the bottom, but under site work, you'll see greenhouse, wastewater treatment plant, maintenance garage, and concession stand. These are just all outbuildings and things, and the wastewater treatment plant that they're pulling out to show you that they will be ineligible costs for the MSBA. Right now, the greenhouse, correct me if I'm wrong, probably the greenhouse, maintenance garage, and concession stand are basically bringing utilities to them, and it's a pad, and then foundation, and then the students, it could be an opportunity for students to build those up, to save costs for the project, but also to provide opportunity for the students to really own those spaces. So that is why we pulled that out here, just to show you that those items are not eligible.
The wastewater treatment plant is not, is out of,
Even without sewerage in the area.
It's, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but,
I'm sorry.
Well, Hanover doesn't have sewerage.
No, but we'd still run a line to connect the future building that gets built on this lot to the wastewater treatment plant on site.
So that's required, even though we're on a septic system, it's because of the increase of use gallons and such, you need to be able to
right, right.
pump it into, and none of that's eligible for reimbursement.
Single portion.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
I'll go
Mr. Chairman?
You give me authorization to share.
Yes, sir.
Share.
I am not on,
You're not the host?
I'm
Oh, you're
not
not on
actually
Zoom.
on Zoom.
Oh,
On my computer.
Carl and Jen, do you guys, have you built a wastewater treatment plant as part of one of your schools in the past?
not recently, it goes back a few years, the last one.
Do you feel that maybe there's some grant opportunities with
Mhm.
EPA or something like that we could go after for?
There are a lot of so-called infrastructure grants nowadays. That's certainly something to pursue. I'm not aware of it necessarily.
Actually, at the meeting I was at last night, Jim, ARPA funds, although we are not eligible directly for ARPA funds, that focuses on infrastructure, that's, or maybe something with the county might be worth looking into, so.
And we could keep things like that in mind, as we move forward, with the project. And also, sometimes the CMs have kind of a department that keeps an eye on all of these types of things. So we'll work on that as a team, but we'll find opportunities that are outside of just
Okay.
MSP.
Like with the wetlands. Ridiculous.
So just to take you through the rest of this, so the total direct costs, that is, the trade costs for the project. That's just what it takes to build the project. And then beyond that, just under that, are the markups that happen, various contingencies, insurances, bonds, the CM fee, overhead and profit, their contingency, for the renovation options that included modular classrooms, phasing, and scheduling premium. This is also where escalation factors in, so that's all the markups on the direct cost, so that then you total all of that and you get the total estimated construction cost. And from there, currently I've added 25% for soft costs, which is what it shakes out to be once we go line by line in the MSBA spreadsheet, which I'll have for next week. But it's typically about 25%, and we may bump that up. It might be a little higher than that once I go line by line for the renovation option, just because it takes longer. Fantastic. So, and then, I forgot, so each option, you'll see that the 805, with the NC, this was 2.1, which is fine. And then, I have, you'll see the Alana estimate, which is, DRA's, estimator, AM Fogarty in the middle, that was Leftfield's estimator. And then on the right of each option, we have a delta just between the two to show kind of where the delta, the largest deltas are. And this spreadsheet is also going to help us figure out exactly where they're off and where their assumptions are off. So this again will be updated, so I'm not gonna get too in the weeds on it. I just wanted to show you how to read it. And then I do have over to the right-hand side an average delta between the enrollments. So this calculates the delta between this one option and just what it is between the two enrollment options. This is also, again, based on the ranges of Alana and AM Fogarty, so it will flex a little bit next time you see it. But generally speaking, that's about the difference between 805 and 900, according to the estimates. So the bottom total estimated, totally estimated project cost, that's the whole kit and caboodle, that's everything. And so that includes the soft costs, the architect and OPM fees, any permitting that needs to happen. That's the bottom line. That would be what you would expect to be paying overall. And that number is the one that the MSBA grant would be applied to when I'm going and doing my MSBA spreadsheets. So it won't be, as we discussed a few previous times, it won't be a straight 55%, or, the MSBA won't be giving you 55% across your whole project. It's only on items they deem eligible. So the effective rate will be below 55%, just so that nobody's surprised at that. And we'll get into more of that next week. Does anyone have questions on this spreadsheet? And I can go into more detail, but I figured next. Please.
Just one quick question, I think, I don't know whose spreadsheet this is, but, 905 on NC1, this one here, the general conditions, deltas off, I mean, I know it's a spreadsheet there, but
So, yeah.
it says that delta's 8.3 million there, so.
Yeah.
But it looks as though the bottom line totals are lined up, so. And could you remind me while we're just, the soft costs, I know that you said there's gonna be an MSBA spreadsheet, but what does soft costs represent? Is that furniture and fixtures and?
Yep, exactly. So it's
Fees.
basically fees, yeah.
Contingency, owner's contingency. These contingencies you see here are what you might call the estimator's contingencies. They know that, you know, even though the plans are a little more developed, there's a lot more information still to come. And so they make an allowance for that, things that, you know, they can't see on the plans or in the narratives.
Yeah.
Even at this point, that contingency generally goes down. It starts off at about 12 or 15% right now. Each phase, it'll come down a little bit, but that money gets redistributed up on all the line items. So in other words, the cost for steel may go up a little bit on the line item next time, but the contingency will come down. And so the bottom line kind of stays the same. That's their method.
I have another question on soft costs.
Go ahead.
Soft costs basically too, could be is furniture, right?
Yes,
No, what do we do with the desks that we have now, if they're in good condition, we just transfer them over?
Absolutely.
Right, okay, does it all?
Only purchase what we need to furnish the school.
Right.
yeah, that'll be a decision you'll want to make at schematic design. When we put the whole budget together, whether you make the assumption that you buy all new and then you work backwards from that, or whether we spend time and do a more detailed kind of inventory. Well, how many cafeteria tables are really good, and, you know, which desks or teacher desks, and how many chairs, and so forth. So, some districts choose to just, at schematic, say, we're gonna buy all new, and anything that we can salvage is kind of like gravy, I guess, and brings the cost downstream. But,
We'll probably not be that district,
okay,
in my recommendation, and hopefully we'll even be able to talk to the construction manager about salvaging some of the outbuildings that we've recently constructed and whether they can be relocated. That's the tail on the dog, but it all matters, that we would not want
Yeah,
to pay
making
for
a
something
decision like
twice.
that, and showing the, 9 down, that we are we're building conservatively, we're not just spending crazy.
Mhm.
You know, getting everything, you know, we want our own furniture, we want this, we want, no, we're getting our needs,
That's right.
and that's a selling point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Exactly.
I agree.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
do they take the same approach to a welder, some of the shop equipment? Is that, if it's in good working condition, I would think they'd use it also.
Mr. Chair, yes, precisely, George,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And our recent success with state grants that we have put into our vocational programs, we are all doing this with an eye that it's going to migrate over unless there's a structural reason why it can't.
Yeah.
But otherwise, when we really get into the development of, you know, the actual placement of all these items in the new instructional footprints, I mean, there'll be inventory codes saying number 1, 2, 3, 5 is gonna go right here.
Yeah.
And absolutely, we're not going to the catalog for new equipment that is
That's gonna be-
perfectly functional here.
That'll be a busy summer.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed. Indeed.
But it does sometimes become a challenge for your shop instructors too, because it's not always done just in the summer before you open. Sometimes certain equipment that has gas hookups or power or ventilation, it has to get installed earlier. So that means you're sort of taking it out of commission in your present school, putting it in the new school.
Yeah.
And so the instructor's gotta make sure he doesn't need that table saw in May.
Peanut butter and jelly at the brass
Because it's in the new
lantern for
building
like
now.
6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
When you renovate your kitchen and you don't have a stove for a while, right?
And that's the stuff we'll look, forward to make sure that nobody's surprised that we're taking something out one day.
Right.
Everybody will know in advance.
Are we gonna lose anything like, automotive, we just put in a, thing for,
An alignment rack?
especially an area where they're painting cars and things.
Spray booth.
Huh?
The spray booth.
Yeah, spray booth.
The spray booth might be one example of something where the relative age of it might
Oh,
not,
right, yeah, I'm
might not
saying,
be able to migrate, but.
are we, we're
Whatever.
looking to keep something like that?
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Okay,
yes. I would want to weigh the cost of dismantling and reassembling
no,
the age of the item
right.
versus
Yeah.
something
But you
new.
got, you got new types of lifts that, different cars and different weights and stuff.
We have to do everything we can to keep initial operating costs as low as possible, period.
Okay.
I'm shooting for a summer job.
You're on. Our Cal's on.
to Carl if we're done with the cost.
Everyone's,
So we just wanted to sort of refresh your memory as to, you know, what these options look like, so that in terms of the evaluation matrix, we'll go over it quickly again, but NC 2.0 is the one that has the gymnasium, the auditorium, the student commons / cafeteria on one end of the building. And then it's slide 11, I think, is it page 11 in the way you numbered them? That's my slide number in those, so you can follow along. First floor plan of NC 2.0.
Fine, so,
Yeah, 11, yeah.
Okay.
you showing me, I show you.
Okay. So again, and this, you might remember too, at the urging of some members, we got, the plan got flipped, to mirror image so that the gym and the locker rooms are on the left-hand side of this, let's call it the south end of the building. On this, which puts them in closer proximity to the athletic field.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things to keep in mind, because it's sort of one of the differentiating items between these two options. And again, the high bay shops are all shown in the purple color there, and they're grouped, you know, kind of by career clusters. So the construction shops are together, and automotive is on the end of the building where cars can come in one side and exit the other side, so it can be a drive-through, but being on a corner location. The other thing to notice on this one, the way it lays out horticulture is in the back of the building with the greenhouse attached, through a connector. It's not like a lean-to greenhouse against the building, it's actually a freestanding greenhouse with a little tunnel kind of attachment, so the students can, go back and forth without literally going outside, there. And as Tom mentioned, we may actually try and reconstruct the greenhouse that you have. It's sort of a kit of parts, like an erector set. It might be able to be taken apart and reassembled there, and just require the labor to do that. Let me just quickly walk you through. So up above, you can see now the gym is at the second level, remember, above the locker room. The auditorium is a double height space with that balcony around it. There's really no floor space in the middle where the X is there. That purple there is the auditorium, multi-purpose space with an open stair, to an upper level lobby. And then in the middle of the building, that green space wedge shape is the library learning commons. Prominent kind of on the front of the building. You'll see that three-dimensionally. And then these are classrooms. The deeper blue are the science labs. And then the remaining low base shops are at this level. And then as we go up to the third floor, there is a third floor in this. We get the balance of classrooms. And then remember, we made that decision to relocate one high base shop, the electrical shop, up to this third floor. It'll still have a high ceiling here because now it's the roof. We can make it the appropriate height. And it's sort of conveniently located right next to a large oversized elevator. So shifting materials up and down is relatively accomplished here. And the other thing to notice on this one, we compare with the other one, is the yellow area is the corridor, is the circulation, what we call circulation space in the building. And so with the way that the electric shop is positioned here, the corridor just has to run to the entrance point. There is an exit point at the other end, but we don't need any more corridor there. In the other option, you'll see we have a bit more corridor in the way that the building lays out.
So it meets all 5 points.
It does, yep.
Okay.
And we updated the three-dimensional view of the building just to help you picture it again, so you can see it is a 3-story building, kind of in the center here, and then the electric shop on the left-hand side of this view. You can see the gymnasium poking up there in the back. The entrance, this wedge shape sort of volume is the library. It would have a high ceiling and a portion of it kind of appropriate for that space. Otherwise, as we look closer, I guess you see maybe in the three-dimensional view here, right here, from Webster Street, this is what it would look like, and I think I can zoom in a little bit so you can see. So here's the main entrance here. And the office administration is right inside that vestibule. This is that sort of common lobby
This is we're saying here.
with cosmetology on one side, and culinary arts on the other side there. And then up above, this kind of expression is showing classroom fenestration there. That's the second and third floor. You can see the gym would have some high windows. They probably aren't glass windows. I don't know if you've seen this translucent fiberglass material. It's called Cowall. It sort of diffuses the light. It comes in a pretty economical material, and it's appropriate for gymnasiums where you want to get some natural light, but you want to watch out for the glare of direct sunlight, particularly if you're, like they always say, a basketball player going in for a layup or something. You don't want to have the sunlight shining in your eyes or other activities that are going on in there. And then, oops, I'm sorry, a little too zoomed in there. Move over here. So here's on the ground floor is veterinary science on this end of the building, actually, and it could have an outdoor access point if we still need to develop that program. As you know, there's not an instructor. We're kind of helping the school, develop the curriculum as we think about it. But it may be a place where people bring animals in to be treated or examined and bring them home. And obviously it'd be most convenient if you can do that directly from a parking lot into an outside exit access point up above the science labs, all grouped together in the science department as they requested. And then this is the electrical shop, and you can see how the roof kind of pokes up there to get that extra height. So it is a high base shop, just happens to be on the third floor. So we did update that rendering there. And then the site plan, again, just let me zoom in a little bit, but this is just the same site plan that you all saw previously in a bit more generic fashion, but now applied more literally to this NC 2.0 option. So again, we've got the track football field along Webster Street. We got the driveway virtually in the same location it is now. The entrance driveway coming in between the baseball and track towards the main entrance. This is sort of the entrance plaza here. So the road sort of threads its way through there, around and back out again for the pickup and drop off. The majority of parking spaces are inside of that. There is room for some additional parking spaces closer to the main entry. So some of these, no doubt, would be visitor spaces. Some might be administration or teacher of the month, whoever gets the park close to the front door. They are the closest spots. And then there's still a loop around the building, and that loop has some parking on the sides and parking along the back, and obviously access to all the shops with overhead doors and so forth. There's the greenhouse back there. This building here is the garage. That's one of those buildings where the contractor would provide just the slab and foundation. The students would ultimately build the enclosure above it. And again, so the layout is this is the full-size softball field. It's the baseball field that gets a little bit compromised in dimensions in order to fit here. So we might end up with a slightly higher chain link fence in right field, just to knock down some of those homers that go 290 feet. Because high schools generally try to have 300-foot minimum. 320 is actually more common, but there is enough outfield space, grass, for an overlapping rectangular field in the fall when you're not playing baseball, but you can make use of that grass area there. And then the exit road comes right out by this building again. This is a new driveway location. The current one is about over here, so there. So there is that. We are still showing, and the pricing did include the development of some parking over here in the pricing, just to be, again, conservative, let's say, on the high side, and included a boardwalk across the wetlands here. So this isn't drivable, this is a pedestrian connection. So from whatever is here, we're showing parking spaces. It could be that we trade off the bus parking near the building for bus parking over here and pick up more parking spaces close to the building. But the amount of pavement is roughly the same in that trade-off, so we can still make that decision.
And Carl, that's during schematic design where we begin to
Yes,
start making those smaller priority decisions.
right, because like we say, the amount of pavement that cost is a trade-off, whether it's bus parking, or it could be nothing, if you don't want to develop it.
Just a haircut on the cost.
Right, we don't have a guarantee that, we can get this approved, this crossing of the wetlands there. We're gonna be doing a little bit of fill of wetlands right here in the outfield of the softball field already. That is allowable up to a certain amount, so, with some replication, there. But we'd have to go through the process to get this approved by the locals. So that's, all NC 2.0, so that we remember, yes, Joe?
Go ahead, George.
Thank you. The buses that are at the back of the building.
Yeah.
They essentially go around the building in a clockwise direction.
That's right, so that the students get off on the
Yep.
building side of the.
Yep.
the bu-
Same in the afternoon when they're gonna get on the bus.
Yes, in the morning, it may be, depending on the traffic, that the buses could drop off at the front door and go park.
Yeah.
Or go back out on another route if that's what they do.
Yeah.
But in the afternoon, where they all, are queuing up at the same time, we would envision that happening all around the back of the building. And the
then-
students come out in whatever door is most convenient.
Yeah.
To the bus number 12 or 18 or whatever it is.
And then when the buses are loaded with the students and they're leaving at the end of the day, see where it says 50 spaces?
Yes,
And they're gonna make a sharp right turn and then to go out the exit.
If this remains a one-way circulation, which is the way it's envisioned right now,
Yeah,
yes, they'd make a right turn here, this radius would get a little larger.
yeah, it looks like a pinch point.
Yes, it get a little, but it's still a right-hand turn.
Yeah.
They would wait, and you have to make sure that any queuing up cars don't block that intersection.
Yeah.
That requires a little supervision, in addition to painting a little X on the pavement,
Yeah.
which, as we know, that in and of itself doesn't stop cars from parking there.
I also,
Just while we're mentioning that too, these little dash lines indicate potential gate locations.
Huh.
So then on weekends or after hours, you could close off the back of the school and have gates there, so that you don't get unwanted, people hanging out back there.
the other question I had was, what is an approximation of when a fire drill occurs in the existing structure? How long does it take to evacuate the building?
I think, Sandy, we're doing that within 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes.
Oh, a minute and a half, I mean, very fast, yeah.
Wow, and so now we're talking a 3-story building. What would your guess be for evacuating that structure?
Yeah, I would double it, right? Get
Sure.
this Down
Down the stairs,
the,
yeah.
down the stairs.
Yeah, because the elevators are.
Yeah, you don't take the elevator.
If it's a fire drill, no elevator.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I have a
Which is
comment.
still good.
When we first was looking at the design, and putting the ball fields on Webster Street, I was kind of hesitant, but I traveled and I looked at West Bridgewater's new school. And they have a huge, probably as high as the ceiling
Yes.
of a netted fence,
Yeah.
which you can hardly see.
Mhm.
And it kind of changed my mind.
Mhm.
And I would just say, it's the right thing to do.
It's like in Fenway Park,
Yeah.
that they put that new safety, you sort of see right through it.
Yeah.
Right,
Disappears
don't even see
after a while.
Yeah, I was quite surprised.
So, just to refresh your memory, then NC 2.1, the reason we call it center core is because those core facilities of student commons, gymnasium, over locker rooms, and multipurpose auditorium are now in the center of the footprint. And essentially, these 2 blocks of high bay, shops are on either side. And the entrance to the school is in the middle, is in the center there. This is again, page 17, I think, right, in your handout. So it still has that common public lobby that gives access to both culinary and cosmetology, up front here, along with the school store. And otherwise, the layout of the shops is fairly similar. one difference to note is horticulture ends up on one end of the building near the greenhouse, but the greenhouse isn't literally attached on this option either. The upper floors, again, you can see the gym, the auditorium, the library, those so-called core facilities are in the center, and then there's two wings on either side. And then the third floor here, this is where you can see we have a bit more corridor, because here's the electric shop. On this one, there are some classrooms there. Because we have those spaces of gym and auditorium and library, cafeteria in the center of the building, we sort of necessarily need a connecting corridor there so that both parts of the third floor are connected. And that's really the difference in the planning of the building that results in a slightly different amount of area for gross area for the same net educational area, slightly different in that. And then just to show you again, three-dimensionally, we're showing kind of a curved front wall here. It just seems in this one with the center entrance as a way to sort of in a large scale move that can be seen from Webster Street as a way to kind of connect the two wings with the center and volume there and announcing the entrance. And then what it looks like, you know, at eye level. Again, that there'd be some expression there, and the rest of the building is more kind of utilitarian, you might say, focusing the attention on the entrance. Here's the same site plan. If we look at that, here the entrance is here in the center of the site. And one of the other things we could have pointed out on the first floor, remember the student commons cafeteria is at the front of the building. So if we're gonna have some outdoor area associated with that, it ends up in the front of the building. Maybe it could be screened somewhat or with a decorative fence enclosed a little bit, but it is kind of, as you'll see in the evaluation matrix, one of the, I think, less advantaged than having it in the back of the building in the other option. And the greenhouse is located in close proximity to horticulture, but it is kind of across this service drive. But otherwise, all of the same site assumptions apply to this building in terms of the way the buses circulate, how drop-off is done, and so forth. Very, very similar. So that brings us to the chart there that we took a first pass after, not just our own thoughts, but hearing, your feedback over the various meetings and all.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but folks, just if this single piece of paper, if you're using paper, this is the same as what's in that stapled packet, it might be easier to see. It might be easier to see it as Carl goes through it. If not, he has the page split.
Yeah.
And then whatever's easier for you.
So, because we're sort of graphic people, we like to see things graphically as well as verbally. So we use colors and the words to sort of highlight the pros and cons of these various criteria. So the deeper green is most advantageous. It's sort of like a traffic light, right? Green, yellow, red. So the red is the lowest sort of rating. Not that it's necessarily always negative, but it's just less advantageous than compared to the other options. Yellow is kind of more neutral, and then in between there's an orange or a light green. So you can see the little code down here in the lower right, ranking from sort of most advantageous to least. So in this case, the Ad Reno has very few things where it's, the most advantageous, other than, as Bob pointed out, the slightly lower initial cost. We should point out, though, that another way to look at it is in terms of kind of, as was mentioned, value, not just cost, but because it's not exactly apples to apples. With the new building, you're getting all new systems. Yes, in the renovation, you'll get mostly all new systems, but there are things like buried plumbing lines that we're gonna tie into. Unless we dig up the slab and replace all those too, the cost would go even further up. We haven't made that drastic an assumption. So there's structure that's not exactly new that we're keeping in the building. So there are some aspects of the infrastructure that make it not quite the same long-term value. Some people use an example of buying a used car or buying a new car. If the price of the used car gets up to be 75–80% of the cost of a new car, you'd sort of say, well, I go for the new car with the full warranty and things like that. I think we're a lot closer than that even. We're probably at 85–90% the cost of new versus, or renovation rather, versus new. Otherwise, the real comparison is looking at the subtle differences between 2.0 and 2.1. And in our minds, a couple of things that are shown here, just if you look quickly at the colors, the slightly lower construction cost for 2.0 than 2.1, again, related to the size of the building. So that shows up. And then kind of how you look at that circulation. One reason for putting the core in the center of the building is it shortens the student's distance. If you're in a shop all day and you're going to lunch, you have a shorter distance to go to the center of the building than to go, down a long core. But conversely, if you're going from one class to another, you're still going the length of the building, and you might be traveling through the center, kind of might be seen as disruptive to activities in the student commons or the cafeteria that you're cutting through there. So it's not as, in and of itself a significant issue, but depending on how you look at it. But that issue of having the cafeteria in the front of the building versus the back of the building, I think it's up to your judgment, but I think the consensus would be we prefer to have the students, if they are, allowed to go outside, to be in the back of the building. You can still be contained. It's actually the south, more sunny side of the building too, in that regard. So it's a positive for the 2.0 option. And I think there was one other, the location of the locker rooms to the athletic fields. When they're located at the end of the building, it's a much more convenient, and they'll be less likely to, walk through the school with their cleats on to go out the front door to get to the athletic fields. When the gym is in the center of the rear, they have to kind of go all the way around the building to get there. Again, not a huge thing, but we are kind of looking for subtle differences between these two options because they are fairly close. But those are the ones that we would call to your attention, but certainly you may have others or other criteria even that aren't showing up here.
Could I mention something? Just looking at the images of the building, this one and then the second one, I think that the second image, although there's two things. I really like in the first image where the gymnasium is, because again, the locker rooms are closer to the playing field, so there's that. The front of that building isn't as attractive in my mind as the second rendition. I really like that swoop that goes down to a point that's at the front of the building. So if I could have my cake and eat it too, I would love to have the swoop with the gymnasium on the right-hand side as you look at the front of the building.
Swoop tech, there we go.
Yeah.
I got one question on the third floor where the car stops at the electrical shop.
Yeah.
Is that door going to be tied to the fire alarm so it opens in case of emergency?
No, there's a stair there. It's not a
I
dead end.
understand, but it's,
Yeah. So
I
that,
did fire alarms for mine.
yeah, it wouldn't be an exit for other students on the third floor to go through the electric,
Right,
because
that
there's a stair right there.
stairway is the site of the fire. You've cut down,
Well, there's stairs, there are other stairs in the
Only
middle of the
one.
building and the other end.
yeah.
No, for the electric shop itself, there's two ways out. If you're in the
Right,
electric
I'm
shop.
talking for the rest of the school, if they're forced to go in through the electrical shop and down that stair because the center stairway is blocked.
No, there are three stairs.
Right.
Yeah.
The center.
Around.
There's one at the other end. Yeah, and there's one by the auditorium that you don't see there. So, yeah, so if the stair by the electrical were blocked, you go down by the auditorium.
Down here,
Yes,
right, but what I'm saying is this is blocked, you know, sometimes in a panic, we have to consider. I did at Simmons College, and it was a security gate. You know, because they didn't want people taking documents out and stuff like that. And they had the biggest argument with me because under Boston law, that had to open in case of a fire alarm.
Yeah, because that's a.
And they just couldn't get that. I have to get people out of the building, I don't care about the documents at that point. So, you know, it's just sometimes, it's a pet peeve I have, to make sure people get out.
we have a code consultant too, who get involved in things like that too, can help clarify. There are times where, you know, sometimes we've added stairs to alleviate that kind
Right.
of situation.
It's just something I picked up on.
Yeah.
Especially in class.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask,
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Carl, is the square, at this point, is the square footage, the gross, I guess, square footage of 2.0 and 2.1 still the same, or has that number, I know you mentioned something about the corridors and,
Yeah,
is 2.1 a little bit bigger just in
Yes.
gross square footage?
yes, and that's why it's a little bit more expensive.
Okay, Yeah.
So even though we're still fine tuning those cost estimate numbers, I think proportionally, it's still gonna remain a little bit more expensive because it's a little bit bigger.
on a per square foot basis, might those be closer, or when you say, it'll be more costly, slightly more costly on a per square foot basis, or is you just talking about
No, gross,
the gross cost?
yeah, the square foot cost might be exactly the
It
same,
might be the same, got it,
because it's bigger, it'll.
understood.
The total.
Thank you.
will be higher.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
If I remember correctly, the space used in a classroom, the state is happy to help out with, but if it's a corridor, then they aren't on board with paying for that or.
No, they still include that, they allow a factor of 50%. If we add up all the classrooms and all the educational spaces, that's called the net space,
Yeah,
then we multiply by 1.5. That's still legit eligible for reimbursement. So 50% more than just the classroom space. That includes corridors, toilet rooms, boiler rooms, elevators, mechanical shafts, stairs, things that are technically non-educational use.
yeah,
For
Although-
safety issues.
You have to have them.
Yeah.
To get to the full building. We actually try to get the most use out of those spaces as we can, so that, you know, corridors might have some built-in benches or little alcoves, and you can use them for some extended learning space, as the educational consultant calls it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And on a new construction project, they don't let you go over that 1.5
right,
factor. And
right,
if you
that's
do,
the,
they'll be like, hey, look at this again,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you where the problem is. We'll know where,
yeah,
it'll be 1.5 when we hand it
It will,
in,
yeah.
but,
Yeah.
we're always under it, yeah.
Where are the lockers, the kids' lockers in the corridors?
Currently, yes.
I mean, on the new building.
I'm not sure if we,
They have two lockers, right? They have a locker in the shop. And an academic locker in the corridor, so-called, yeah.
And is it all like, we'll say, on the first floor, or the second floor, or the third
No,
floor?
they'd be distributed generally. What we're finding actually in high schools these days is that not every kid needs a locker anymore. They don't,
Not at all.
we don't have as many books, and they don't have time between classes to go get their science book on the way to science class.
That's very
If
true.
they have one, they
Not in a big
generally
school.
bring their laptop, computer, or Chromebook.
Backpacks, yeah.
Yeah,
In our school, they really only need them for their trade week.
yeah,
During their academic week, they bring their backpack with them, they don't wear coats.
yeah, well, I just know where it
Yeah,
goes.
and
So-
at the end of the day.
So to save money these days, generally, we go through this deliberation, how many lockers should we put? We've ended up generally around half. So if you have 800 students, we'd only put in 400 lockers,
Or you
in
may have
addition to
kids,
their shop lockers.
when you're in their trade week, they may wanna get special shoes, you know, shirts.
Could be the trade lockers.
Yeah,
Right.
they
They
have
need
that.
space for their backpacks, which they bring with them, those are very important, they can with them everywhere.
Yeah.
parking space, locker. You can't have both.
I was looking at the parking space where we have to build a bridge, did I see it right, 99 spaces?
That's how many you can fit over there.
That's a lot of spaces not to push for us.
And you'd have a neighborhood uprising.
Exactly.
It
Oh,
could,
You'd
is that
have,
Hancock there?
it's behind about 5 houses.
Really?
Yeah, right
When they-
behind.
When they
Well,
leave,
But that's okay, I don't live
we
around.
consult.
I do, I'm the rep from, and I know them.
That's your problem, move.
yeah, but
We'll put your address on the sign.
you went too fast?
Hey,
I-
Yeah, where is
But that would be a potential.
It's overgrown.
That would be a potential problem.
I mean, if you had just buses parked there twice a day, why?
Because buses make noise,
No, not the propane.
still.
When they back up, they beep,
It's,
as all buses
The
do.
bell.
we've been through this spectrum.
But it might be better than 99 cars who look like the Celtics Expressway.
Well, the good news is that it, even with environmental setbacks, there is a strip of land that is developable,
Mhm.
can be developed for
It's a
some.
possibility.
And that would also impact ultimately when we go through schematic design, because if you're making it parking, you're putting asphalt there, they're calling out these costs. Maybe it ends up being an open quasi, that's where the golf team learns how to putt. I mean, there's definitely the option to develop it. This might be the time to consider it. But as all these other priorities fall into place, we at least know, for years we've said, I wonder if we could do anything with that little strip of land. Now we have the answer. We know we could. Now it's a question of what would be the best use. And we want to take advantage of all of the space that can be developed. And if it's not for parking, it could be, we talked about, as we were doing the site plans here, it could be for something else. Administratively, we would probably make the case that when you consider the weather that we're having right now, I would be reluctant to have students who might be staying after school and going to their cars at this satellite lot, going across the footbridge. Again, this is just my imagery of, where's the car? Where am I going? Maybe that's not the case, but it would require some additional development. I'm just glad to know that if there's something there that we say this district could use that space for, it can be developed. So it's a good placeholder.
And it's not like wall-to-wall pavement too. There is a setback there that could be planted or fenced to give it. And there's only 1, 2, 3 abutters. In that sense, there's people across Main Street, but there's 3 abutters there.
Traffic.
From that point. So.
80 cars.
We'll name it after Bob.
He would love.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to be continued.
I'd love to see what the town would say, just because of the intersection that is to the right of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a traffic light there.
Yeah, there is a traffic light. That would be, for 20 minutes, a nightmare.
Could you make it so it's right turn only when you're leaving?
To the light,
Yeah,
it would jam up in no time.
okay, I'm just thinking, isn't that less of an obstacle than people turning left? But again, with the light right there, it backs up almost immediately.
Yeah, it would jam.
Yeah.
Talking about the, going towards,
Going north toward Norwell.
Yeah, straight out there.
North on Main
there's a
Street.
right, I thought that right turn goes into like an industrial park, but a lot of houses.
Immediately coming out of that 99 space spot, bang in a right, Dan, you would eventually come up to the Webster main
Webster
traffic.
Strap.
And that's,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
yeah.
within
Just
a couple of houses.
There's only 2 houses
Yeah,
in
exactly.
between.
So you could, a car is about 18 feet long and give it another 2 feet in front of it. So you're gonna have a space for about 5 cars before you get to the light. And you got 94 behind you that still wanna get
And the
out.
normal traffic.
Yeah. There's an answer somewhere. We don't know.
I'm just saying the possibility of problems and arguments.
Oh, yeah.
Is the town gonna allow you to do a curb cut?
Yeah,
That could be further agricultural space to develop for farm to table initiatives, or it could be something with athletics. We could integrate it somehow into our curriculum. When you consider the horticultural landscape programs work on our campus now, and you look at what we're proposing here, and you factor out all the driveways and the parking, and potentially with a synthetic turf field at Webster Street, what the horticulture program could be maintaining on our campus in the future, that area might fit quite nicely with places for them to practice. Right now, so they could maintain our baseball and softball field, the ancillary grass, some plantings around the building, certainly. So again, I think it will reveal itself.
You could think of it as
Vegetable
a,
gardens, so the neighbors,
What's that?
vegetable gardens.
Community garden, there we go.
you could think of it as a
That'd be
two-step permitting process too. The real permitting is this crossing right here.
That's a good point.
And
That's
you don't necessarily go for the pavement, just to get the boardwalk in.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you could use this for open agricultural space, which is kind of what's behind the buses today.
Because we would lose that open agricultural, not that you've been maybe driven around there, but if you go around the back where our buses are now, we cut down a bunch of trees several years ago, and behind where the buses are, there's a place for horticulture to practice with some of their toys and whatnot. That would get wrapped into that softball field. So someone eventually will say, hey, how do we reclaim that space for the program to practice? So that might be part of it.
Yeah.
Or space up around here too.
There's a little bit of space right here still. That's part of it.
Okay, that's good, that's
Yeah.
good.
Was wondering about this 99 space area. How about if on Main Street, you can only enter the parking space? Could you make a driveway that would connect the 99 space area to the other driveway to go? Or is the wetlands just make it impossible?
Well, that would be a discussion with Concom, because now instead of, I don't know, an 8-foot wide pedestrian bridge,
Yep.
now we got a 20-foot wide roadway at least.
Yeah.
Bridge, it's more impact on the wetlands. I'm not sure, and the buffer areas next to it. So whether we could get that permitted or not.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good. Where are we?
At the end.
That's the end? Anybody have any further questions of committee or anything?
We gonna discuss, the liaison? Like that next tomorrow night?
That's just an extra copy, Dan, for
Oh, okay.
regional planning in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring up that we had a Scrivener's error. I forgot to call Sandy's name on the 2 votes we had. I have spoken to her. She'd like to be recorded as a yes vote in both of those matters. So she'll be included in the one to go out of here. The important one, I mean,
No more husbands and others, officially.
I apologize for that.
No worries.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if no one, everybody said, Cohasset, second by Abington.
There you go.
Sorry, Dan, I forgot procedure.
Let's do school committee meeting.
Okay.
That's right.
Not traditional. Oh, my word. Call the roll by committee. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
George Cooney?
Yes.
Jim Coughlin?
Yes.
Jack Manning?
Yes.
Robert Mello?
Yes.
Frank Mola?
Yes.
Tom Petroselli?
Yes.
Dustin Ridden?
Yes.
Dan Salvucci?
Yes.
We are